Hi everybody, thank you for joining us today. I'm Hugo Landry-Tolstruck, the President and COO of SRG, and I'm here to present to you our company. I think one of the most important things, or one of the important things to start with, is our history. We actually are a spin-off of another mining company called Sama Resources, which operates or is doing development and exploration in Côte d'Ivoire. Their CEO, Marc-Antoine Audet, PhD in geology, worked for Falcon Bridge for several years and is one of the world-renowned geologists in the sub-region. While Marc-Antoine was looking for nickel and copper in Côte d'Ivoire, he took reconnaissance permits in Guinea to see the continuation of the strikes or of the mineralization in the sub-region and decided to go to Guinea. So he took reconnaissance permits, was walking along the national highway, and on one of the road cuts, he noticed there was a lot of black. He took samples and realized there was a lot of graphite. He went to the Department of Geology of the Department of Mining in Guinea, and they gave him a box with a full feasibility study on the deposit, which was done in the 1950s by the French. This is very standard in the region. Multiple mines have been built that were originally discovered by the French in the 50s, but as a lot of the other countries in the sub-region, Guinea declared independence from France in 1958. The French left the country and the deposit was forgotten until 2013 when Marc-Antoine rediscovered it. While we're not going to be taking the plans and the engineering plans from the 1950s, a lot of the geological work, specifically the geometry of the deposit, had already been defined. This is already a very important step in development and mining research. Sometimes this can take years and years and years of geological work to determine this. In our case, it was already done. Several pits had been done, and all we had to do was reconfirm that. Some dollars were put into defining the resource into inferred resource. Move forward to 2016. Nickel pricing, copper pricing aren't doing very well, and the board of Sama Resources made a decision to split the companies in two. One, which was going to take the projects that were ready to develop, that were further along, which became SRG, and the other which remained in the other longer lead or earlier stage development in Sama Resources. And so late 2016, early 2017, SRG, which stands for Sama Resources Guinea at the time, came to be, and we've been working on that project ever since. With the history out of the way, there's a few very important things that we like to tell in terms of value proposition or investment proposition for our shareholders and for our clients. Number one is the deposit. Today we have a very large deposit, 8.7 kilometer strike length at surface, easy mining, easy cost structure, which we'll show, and a very important and very interesting nickel cobalt deposit 5 kilometers away. So two very, very important resources. Secondly, a strong management team, over 50 years of combined experience in West Africa, over $500 million US spent in the sub-region in mining and infrastructure, project development, project finance, mine development, all within management today. The third thing is share structure. Today, we have a share structure which is very, very tight, less than 90 million shares outstanding, and will continue to be tight all the way through construction, ensuring that a mining success or an execution success will be transferred into a shareholder success as well. Too often today, we see great mining successes, but very, very weak financial successes, and the main culprit of that is dilution. Today, given our share structure, we don't have that risk. And the fourth interesting thing about the company is access to energy metals. Today, energy metals are a growing market, a brand new market. Graphite, nickel, and cobalt are all materials, or all metals that are going to be benefiting from the clean energy or the revolution. We are in Guinea in West Africa, bordered by Senegal, Mali, Côte d'Ivoire, Liberia, and Sierra Leone. Today, Guinea is a very attractive mining jurisdiction, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on in the presentation. We are 850 kilometers from the capital, Conakry, through a national highway, paved highway, and we are near the town of Lola, which is 50,000 people, and about 30 kilometers away from the town of Nzérikore, which is the second largest city in Guinea. 5 kilometers away from our Lola deposit is the Gogota nickel cobalt deposit, which I'll talk about in a little bit as well. On the Lola deposit, it is 8.7 kilometer strike length, average width of 370 meters, going up to 1,000 meters, and we are looking at mining only the weathered ore for the next several decades, and that goes from zero, so mineralized directly from surface, all the way to about 30 meters at depth. Mineralization continues further down, but today we have for several decades of mining within the weathered ore, and that's a big competitive advantage for our project as well. It's very important to understand the origination of the graphite. In our case, the genesis of the graphite is from the mantle over 3.5 billion years ago, and that has a significant impact on the impurities that we have or the lack thereof. So some compared to some other projects which are less than 1 billion years old, which come from decomposing organics, that drives to a lot of heavy metals, vanadium, manganese, multiple impurities that can be used in battery metals, for example. In our case, given the genesis of the graphite, we have none of those impurities. We have no sulfur, we have no calcium, we have no heavy metals, and those are all important things. We have a fairly significant resource, but in reality, a resource in graphite is not what's important. What's important is how efficiently you can extract it, how much you can purify it, and how much you can sell. Talking about selling, graphite is sold slightly different than a traditional metal. It's not sold on an exchange. You can't look up the price of graphite. It's sold in bilateral agreements with one-on-one by clients and per market. And price is determined by a few different factors. Number one is the size of the flake, and number two is the purity of the flake. In our case, we have over 50% of our flakes that are in the jumbo and large categories, and in the 96-97% purity range. So number one, and I'll talk about in a second, is flake size. Number two is purity. The benchmark is 94-95% graphite content in the concentrate. Every percentage above, you get a bonus. At 97%, you get a pretty significant bonus, and at 99%, you get an even higher bonus. Every percentage below 94%, you get a penalty up to 90-91%, where then it becomes much more difficult to sell your product at good value. In our case, all of our flakes, through all our distribution, through flotation, will be able to obtain 96-97%. And the third very important factor, which doesn't determine price, but determines if it's suitable for a particular market or not, are the impurities. What are the 3-4% that is not graphite? If, for example, you have manganese or vanadium, those have to be purified out to be able to use in the battery market. So the higher they are, the more costly it is to turn graphite into anode material. In our case, we don't have any of that. And the other thing that we don't have is sulfur. It does generate sulfuric acid in your tailings, and therefore you have significantly more CapEx and OpEx associated to tailings management. Going back to graphite grades, you see on the left, you see our breakdown of what we're going to be producing. If we move to the right, we see the markets that we're going to be selling into, and further to the right, the pricing that we can get per ton. So in the super jumbo, we're looking to sell through the traditional market, the largest graphite market today, which is refractories. Crucibles, graphite bricks, linings. The steel industry is a large consumer of graphite, and that's where you get the top dollar. You can get $2,500 to $1,800 a ton. Moving further down into the large, jumbo and large, one of the big growing markets is expandable graphite and graphite foils used in electronics and in building materials and flame retardants. That you can get $1,300 to $1,600 a ton. Moving further down into what we call mediums, again, traditional markets, brake pads, some lubricants, liners, that you can get $1,100 to $1,200 a ton. And then further down, we have 35% of our graphite is the fines, or what we call small flake. That goes into lubricant market, and now a growing market of battery metals. And that you can get $850 to $1,000 a ton, but you can't just take that graphite and put it in a battery. You have to do some more work to it, and I'll get to that in a second. You see this chart beside me is a comparator between us and some others in the industry. Basically, the darker the blue, the larger the graphite flakes are, the more dollars per ton that we can get. Gives us a good idea of where we are, where we're situated in terms of revenue, in terms of dollars per ton. Going back to batteries, graphite in a battery is used as the anode, the side of the battery that holds the charge. And so And so graphite is a very, very important material. It doesn't matter the cathode chemistry, so it doesn't matter if you have NCA or NMC or even vanadium redox. There is always, or LFP, there is always graphite as the anode. And 99% of the anode is graphite. Now you can take any graphite and turn it into anode material with enough work and enough chemicals. There's a few things that set our graphite apart. Number one is the amount of chemicals and the amount of wash cycles that have to be done to bring our graphite to the 99.95% required for battery materials is low. Number two is yield. The average yield using traditional equipment of spheroidization and micronization is in the order of 35%, mid-30s. In our case, using the same equipment, we are in the mid-40s. That means for every ton of concentrate that we sell to our client, which is going to be turning into anode material, they get an extra 100 kilos of material out of our graphite. And the third thing is obviously the charge. How much charge can your graphite hold? In our case, we're at 365 milliamp hours per gram, and the theoretical limit is 372. Moving on from some of the characteristics is where we are in development. One of the very important things in mining development is exploration and resource definition. A significant part of 2018 has been spent on moving inferred resources to measured and indicated resources. Today we're at over 16 years of mine life, and we're looking to grow that. Obviously we have significant room to grow. That only covers the first 30 meters and only 33% of the surface area. We already have 16 years of mine life, but again, mine life and the resource size in graphite is not that important. In our case, we have lots of leeway to increase that resource. We just decided to spend our resources on better defining our graphite and moving to studies rather than continuing to drill. The PEA has been released and there's a few important things that come out. Number one is the CapEx is at around $100 million. When we compare ourselves to some other developers in our space, that's very low. And there's a few reasons for that. Number one is the nature of our ore. Given we're at surface and we're very, very weathered, we don't have a very large mine to build, which limits CapEx. We also don't need a jaw crusher. We don't need a SAG mill. We don't need any of the large energy and large CapEx numbers, primary grinders for our project. We have a scrubber and a secondary ball mill, and that's all we need. So that saves on CapEx. And the third thing is tailings management. Given we have no sulfur and we have no acid generators, we have a very simple tailings management and a very simple tailings dam to build. We also have good topology, which means that we can use the environment to build our tailings dam, which reduces the cost. So on the CapEx, we're very low. On the OpEx, again, given the nature of our deposit, easy to process, easy to mine, given the jurisdiction as well, relatively low wages compared to North America, means that we have a very low operating cost. One of the items where we have slightly higher cost is transport, and that's assuming the worst case of having to transport our concentrate by truck 850 kilometers to the port of Conakry. We also have a secondary, which we consider our base case, a secondary route, which is through Liberia. That's 350 kilometers on a paved road, which would significantly reduce those costs. So all that combined, low CapEx, low operating costs, will put us in the lowest quartile of producers in terms of cost. Project development side, we've made significant progress on that as well. Now that the PEA is out, we've been working now since earlier this year with our technical partners on our pre-feasibility and our trade-off assessment. So we're going through that right now, and we'll be soon moving into feasibility study. And the plan is to have our feasibility study done by the end of Q1, early Q2 of next year. And at the same time, we're finalizing our IFC performance standard environmental impact assessment, which both those documents are required for project financing. So that'll be done earlier in the earlier part of next year. Work on financing, which is already underway with international partners, so that around sometime this year, next year, in the Q2, Q3 timeframe, we'll be ready to start construction, a 16 to 18 month construction, which brings us to the end of 2020 for production and start of production. So right now, one of the items that we're working on and we're spending a lot of time on as well is producing bulk samples. We'll have several tens of tons of concentrate to send to our partners and to send to our offtake partners so that they can start testing our product now, so that when we're ready for construction, we have solid offtake agreements so that we can move to financing and move forward. Those are the highlights of the Lola deposit and our graphite project. As you can see, we're well on our way. The team is there, the financing's in place, we have the resources required, and we're full steam ahead on executing our studies and working with our partners to sign offtake agreements to move to a construction mid next year. Our next project, and a project that we also work on, which is earlier stage, which is also very exciting, is the Gogota nickel cobalt scandium deposit, which is 5 kilometers away from our graphite deposit. We've done a maiden resource on that, and that's given us 45 million tons in the first 20 meters of ore, so from surface to 20 meters. Different than Lola, there is no ore or mineralized material below it, so it's like a fishbowl, but within that fishbowl we have 45 million tons of material at grading 1.28% nickel, 0.15% cobalt, which gives us a significant resource of contained nickel and cobalt at over 550,000 tons of nickel and over 55,000 tons of cobalt. And we've partnered with SNC-Lavalin and ALS in Australia, the world leaders in treating laterite ores, and we'll be coming out with metallurgical testing later on this year, towards the end of the year, and then later moving on to a PEA. But this is a longer term, larger CapEx, longer term project, which we're very excited on as well. One of the aspects that we see more and more in the mining space, and even more now that we're talking about electric vehicles and batteries, is sustainability and traceability. So there's a few things that we're working on that. Number one, on traceability, we've seen what's happening in the DRC, we see what's happening in Cuba. It's becoming more and more important. Guinea is a strong mining jurisdiction. They signed in 2007 the Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative. Every year the report comes out with flying colors, and the government is very forward thinking on making sure there are no issues and everything is up to international standards in terms of mining, and SRG is committed to that as well. Since we're producing our own power, that gives us the opportunity to work with renewable energy, so we're looking to incorporate as much renewable energy into our production as possible. Another third aspect to sustainability is corporate social responsibility, and we have been working on that even though we're in development and not yet in operations. We have set aside a budget to that, we have dedicated a resource to that, and we've already done several projects with the local community to increase their capacity so that they can become a technical partner and a service provider to us, but also doing things like improving schools, improving water wells, sponsoring soccer teams, all these things that fall within the corporate social responsibility portfolio that are very important for our social license to operate in the country. On a more macro level, it's also important to be well in tune and to be supported by the national government, and in our case we can 100% say that we are. All three stages of government, mining, finance, and environment, are large supporters of the project. We expect no issues in permitting, and that's going very, very well, all the way from the highest levels to the local authorities. They are great supporters. One of the major things about our project is we are in the southeast region of the country, whereas most of the mining operations are in the northwest. Guinea holds 25% of the world's bauxite reserves in the world, holds very large iron ore deposits, gold deposits, diamond, precious gemstones. We will be the first graphite project in the country, and hopefully the first nickel cobalt project in the country as well. So the government is highly favorable and can't wait for the project to happen. On the management front, headed by Benoit Assad, our executive chairman, founder of Semifo, has been involved in West Africa since 1995. Marc-Antoine, myself, our VP operations, this will be his third flotation plant he puts in place. Our VP legal, our VP finance, who worked in Guinea for 6 years and in West Africa for over a decade. So the entire team has a vast knowledge of West Africa and Guinea specifically. On the board, we have multiple highly talented individuals. We have a few board members who are graphite specific specialists. We have a board member who is also on the board of other battery material producers. And we also have 2 members of our significant shareholder, Chorus Capital, out of Burkina Faso, which provides us with some good African knowledge as well. As I mentioned earlier in the presentation, our capital structure is something that's very, very important to us and very important to our shareholders as well. With less than 90 million shares outstanding on a fully diluted basis today, we will be in construction, or will be construction financed with what we hope is less than 100 million shares outstanding. That in the industry is almost unheard of and ensures that a mining success will drive a shareholder success as well. Within our shareholding structure, we have Sama Resources through the spin-out that has retained 30% of the company, Chorus Capital, which is a large investment bank in West Africa, the largest bank in Burkina Faso, present in 6 countries, has done financings for several mining companies in the sub-region, owns 17% of our capital and have participated in each of our financial raises, is a very important partner. And with management and insiders, we own collectively over 50% on a fully diluted basis of the float, so that ensures that shareholders and management are fully aligned. We've also worked with analysts, as we know that helps investor confidence as well. So with that, I'd like to thank you very much for listening to my presentation. And if you would like to reach us or ask questions, you have our information, and I encourage you to do so. Thank you very much for your time.